Good morning. I'm Todd Tim, District Administrator of the Hortonville Area School District, and I wanted to provide our community members and parents, all residents that live in the Hortonville Area School District, as we enter a new, the several months before a new two-year state budget. What does the budget impact in the state of Wisconsin and federally look like for the Hortonville Area School District? And just explain a couple items of how we're funded here at HASD. So I appreciate you taking a couple minutes to watch this podcast. If we look at the state of Wisconsin, I think it's important to note that in the state of Wisconsin from 2002 to 2020, the state of Wisconsin has been the third slowest as far as funding increases for public schools in the nation. The Hortonville Area School District has benefited from growing enrollment. And in the state of Wisconsin, you are partially funded through your enrollment. In fact, when you add new students in Wisconsin, you get a rolling funding piece over a 3-year period for each new pupil. So you're not totally funded for new students that are entering the district. You get 1/3 funding for the first year, and then you get the second third in the second year, and you get full funding in the third year for new students that enter our school district. So even though a growing enrollment can be advantageous from a budget perspective, if you're hiring new staff as class sizes increase with new students, it doesn't make you wholly funded until that particular child has been here for a 3-year period. Revenue limits and a flat budget in 21-22 for public schools will of course not improve the national comparison that Wisconsin has been in from 2002 to 2020. And we know that the state of Wisconsin, as recognized by the nonpartisan Wisconsin Legislative Fiscal Board, is projected to have somewhere between $3.8 billion and $5 billion surplus waiting for either the rainy day fund in Wisconsin or to be allocated through the state budget. Our fiscal year in the Hortonville Area School District runs from July 1 to June 30th. I think it's also important to note that we don't run on a calendar year cycle. So we have what's called a fund balance for the purpose of satisfying our short-term obligations, financial obligations, especially payroll and benefit payments, because we receive the majority of our funding in the winter and the spring, but our fiscal year begins on July 1. So if we didn't have a fund balance or a short-term savings account, we would have to short-term borrow to meet payroll and to meet benefit payments. And of course, in short-term borrowing, you'd have to pay interest on those loans. So the Hortonville Area School District is in solid financial shape, especially compared to other school districts throughout the state. We have a fund balance that allows us to not have to short-term borrow and then receive payments in the middle of our fiscal year. The Hortonville Area School District in the last fiscal year paid a voucher payment of $1.25 million. So on your property tax bills, you see payment to Fox Valley Technical College, you see payment to your particular municipality in which you reside, and you see payment to the Hortonville Area School District. But it's also important to remember that property tax dollars are also going to voucher payments to our private school neighbors that reside in the school district. The district did receive ESSER dollars. ESSER dollars were federal dollars during the pandemic that were meant to aid schools that needed to spend additional dollars on substitute teachers, nursing costs, health aides, PPE, some of the items that were essential for us to be both in person and virtually over the last 2 years. And know that there's been a narrative nationally and in the state of Wisconsin that schools have been out of session. And of course, you know that the Hortonville Area School District was in session over the last 2-year period, 5 days a week for students. The state of Wisconsin instituted spending caps in 1992, 1993, into 1994. And what spending caps did for each particular school district is it froze what school districts were allowed to raise per pupil. So school districts that were low spending low revenue districts in the early 1990s, each state budget that increased per pupil allocations was built on that frozen amount from 1992 to 1993. And what that means is schools that were more aggressive in spending in the early 1990s, that had higher per pupil allocations, as new dollars came from state budgets from 92, 93 to where we are now, they were able to build on those amounts. The Hortonville Area School District in the early 1990s was a low revenue district and continues to be a low revenue district in the state of Wisconsin, and I'll show you a graph that displays that in a second. There's also grants and charges back to Medicaid reimbursement that make up our budget, and some other federal funds that are called title dollars, which are generally allocated off a title formula through the socioeconomic status of your community. And that's how the ESSER federal dollars worked as well. So there's 421 school districts in the state of Wisconsin, and when we received federal ESSER dollars, it was off the title formula. And it just so happens, even though we were in person every day over the last 2-year period of that pandemic, we received one of the smallest allocations from the federal government through ESSER funds. So we do have some grants that come from the State Department of Public Instruction that help us with our social workers and reimbursement from our social workers. We have some employees such as PTs, OTs, speech paths, and others that can charge Medicaid for their services because of a special license that they have. And we receive those other federal funds that run through title dollars, which are mainly allocated based on the socioeconomic status of people that reside in our school district. When we advocate with the state legislature, we advocate for additional funding that's not tied to particular items. We can use that funding to ensure that our buildings are kept up. We can use that funding to ensure that we're retaining a high quality staff for the students and families in our district. We also advocate to reimburse more than the 27.79% that we receive in special education or did receive in the 21-22 academic year. So we have several students that are medically fragile students that may require a one-on-one health aide or one-on-one nurse. We have other students that may require a one-on-one support based on other intellectual disabilities. The beauty of a public school is that we get to take all kids, but we do advocate with our legislature that we get additional reimbursement beyond the 27% that we're currently receiving for our special education children. And then we also advocate that there should be some equality with the 421 school districts throughout the state. The districts like Hortonville that have a limit on low revenue, low spending, that we take pride in being fiscally responsible and fiscally conservative, but there should be some equality on funding in the state of Wisconsin. This is a look at the possible future depending on what the next state budget will look like in Wisconsin, and obviously that process will begin after the governor's election and assembly and state senate elections here in November. If you look at 21-22, 22-23, Hortonville Area School District received no per pupil increase. So this next budget cycle, and the purpose behind that is there was an expectation that most districts in Wisconsin would use ESSER funds to bridge the gap to the next budget. The problem with that for us is as inflationary costs on utilities, gas increased, there's a larger gap to make it to the next state budget, and ESSER dollars were partially used as they were expected to be used for additional nurses, health aides, substitutes, as we kept our doors open from 21 to 23 to the last 2 years, including obviously 21-22. So as we're looking forward, there's some implications if we get that top row, $0 like we got in this last budget, that there's a significant deficit that we would face here in the Hortonville Area School District. If we receive $200 per pupil in each of the next 2 years of that state budget, there's still some difficulty there, and that's mainly because we didn't receive any funds from the state in the last budget. If we receive $500 per pupil, that is manageable and doable in the Hortonville Area School District, and then you have some other amount adjustments there on the bottom. And these are all assuming that a 3% increase. We obviously know that the consumer price index is running hot and inflation is running hot. And also assuming a 12% increase in healthcare expenses. You know, obviously the vast majority of our budget in the district is spent on salaries and benefits of our highly qualified staff. Here's a look at, I mentioned that you don't see this on your property taxes, but the district expense when it comes to vouchers, and if you want to see over time from 2015 to 21-22 what the district expense has been for vouchers that have gone to our private school neighbors for tuition of students heading to private schools. If we look at an overall snapshot data dashboard of what we see in the Hortonville Area School District, obviously you're aware that we've had multiple building projects over the last decade. In the last decade, we've built North Greenville Elementary School. We've added on to Hortonville Middle School. We're under our second addition to Hortonville High School. And we just recently completed a section of the addition at Greenville Middle School. And that's strictly in relation to our enrollment growth in the district, a district that is one of the fastest growing school districts in the state of Wisconsin and now has, you know, close to 4,400 students. During that time, our state aid has decreased, our voucher payments have increased, and our per pupil spending is locked at that $10,000 per pupil, which is $1,702.87 less than the state average per pupil, which would equate to about a $7.384 million difference. So again, we take pride in being fiscally responsible, fiscally conservative. Our mill rate has reduced 8 years in a row. Property values have grown. Obviously, that's had impact on that mill rate. We've prepaid debt in order for referendum additional construction costs to not have an impact on the taxpayer, so we feel like we've been responsible with prepaying debt, but would like the state legislature to look at some of the equality that comes with locked in per pupil amounts that was based on early 1990s decisions. It does have an impact on us here in the district. And if you look at our achievement over time, you know, you can look at the Department of Public Instruction report card that the district, every school in the district exceeds or significantly exceeds expectations. We've had an increase in our youth apprenticeship programming. We've had increases in our CAP classes, which are credit-bearing classes, our AP performance of students. In fact, when you look at our students that are taking courses elsewhere when they get to their junior and senior year, we've had a savings last year in the 21-22 academic year of about $1.205 million for those students in advanced credit coursework and scholarships. We've increased offerings in the arts and activities to ensure that every student has something outside of the school day that they can belong to here at HASD. And you see some of that, especially at the 6th through 12th grade level, with our percent of students being engaged, not just during the school day, but outside the school day. Here's some of the resources that I used in this short podcast, and I just wanted to share very briefly, and I'm happy to have further discussion about the impact of the state budget on what we do here in the Hortonville Area School District. And I have great appreciation, and we all have a great appreciation that taxpayer revenue is funding the work that we do with children here, and hope that we're giving back, and our kids and what they're learning are giving back to our community, and would like to see the state of Wisconsin look at some things with per pupil funding, with revenue limits, and look at districts like the Hortonville Area School District to support us moving into the future in this next state budget. Again, by all means, if you have questions or would like to talk more about the state budget and its impact on us here at HASD, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. Thank you.